Hi, I'm Jenn Hsia. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Sharp teeth, don't ever do this. Bad. Basically, lift it gently, you'll see the gill. So leaders, just like flies, there's so many ways that you can tie a leader. Okay, so I will be talking about pike on the fly. This is sort of a basic overview. I do have a lot of slides, so I will try to get through everything as quickly but succinctly as possible. And I should definitely just start off by saying I love pike. Pike are fantastic. And if you've never fished for pike, you really should give it a try. Aggressive fish. They are not the smartest fish, so that often means that you have multiple chances to throw your fly back out them, and there's a reasonable chance that they'll actually take it on a third or fourth presentation. And they're hard fighters, but they don't fight for too long, so your arm won't fall off, which is kind of nice. So northern pike, they're freshwater species. They can get pretty large, so up to 40, 50 inches. The big ones are the females, so they're the big mamas. And they can live between 10 to 15 years, even up to 25 years. I happen to think they're very pretty. They have this really beautiful olive green with a white belly, and then they have these little yellow white bars across their flank, and then these dark spots on their fins. So they're hard to mistake for other creatures. So where are pike located? One of the great things about them is they're located in a large variety of water. You can find them in either rivers or lakes, so plenty of opportunities to target them. I think the important thing to remember about pike is that they are essentially ambush predators. So when I'm trying to figure out where should I be focusing or where should I fish, what are the likely spots a pike could be in, I'm looking for areas where pike can lay in wait and ambush a bait fish that's happening to go by. So this is basically weeds and structures. You'll probably hear that about every fish in the world, but they like weeds and structure. So pike will typically lie or lurk motionless in the cover of weeds or other structure. They're going to wait for prey to come to them. In my experience, pike don't do a lot of roaming around, so they can stay in one place. And so weed beds are an excellent place to target, as pikes will sit there, they'll wait for that unsuspecting bait fish to fish by or swim by, and then they'll lunge out and try to grab it. So lily pads, milfoil, those are really good places to target in the lakes. With a fly, I'm typically fishing that line. It's hard to get your fly in there deep into weed beds without snagging. So typically the weed line works well for me. If you're looking for them on rivers, there are several areas that I like to target. So in a river, one of my favorite places is to target that slower, swampy, slack-looking water, especially if it's sitting next to faster moving current. So you want to think about maybe a back eddy off the main current, or it just looks swampy and gross. I'm always going to at least give like 2 or 3 casts in there. Mouths of tributary where cooler water is coming in, food can be coming in, drop-offs, rocky points. These are all kind of classic ambush spots that predators are going to lie in. And then submerged trees are another classic spot where pike will be nearby. So if you are thinking about getting into pike fishing, sort of basic equipment, I typically recommend anywhere between a 7 or 10 weight single hand rod. I personally fish an 8 weight, that's my favorite. And you can use a floating line, intermediate line, full sink line. You can use all 3 if you want. And we'll kind of go over each of those in a little bit. I think what's most important of your equipment, though, is that you have to have a bite guard. And a bite guard is a length of line that's basically wire tippet, or something like 60 to 90 pound fluorocarbon, something that's really thick and abrasion resistance that can resist the sharp teeth of the pike from cutting through it. And then I always will also recommend wire cutters, long pliers, jaw spreaders, and a good net. So for me, I think the rod weight really kind of depends more on the fly that you're throwing, not necessarily the size of the pike that you're fishing. And so as a general rule, if I'm throwing a fly that's anywhere between 2 to 5 inches, I typically am going to throw a 7-8 weight rod. If it's something bigger, a 6 to 10 inch fly, I might actually fish a 10 weight. And all of this is going to be dependent on your casting ability, your arm strength, your comfort level. There are plenty of people who can throw 6 to 10 inch flies on 8 weights, but I'm not quite that good of a caster yet, so I need a little extra oomph to help me get that out there. And I think almost every question or favorite thing that people want to ask is, what are your favorite flies? Well, that's an easy answer. You go to Predators on the Fly and you get a cool little bait fish pattern like this that will catch you pike. Really, I think that the fly itself is actually not super important. You can catch pike on literally anything. The other day I caught a 35-inch pike fishing. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's basically this, I don't even know what this is. It's like a shrimpy thing. I was fishing for smallmouth, and this is what I decided to throw on. And this pike just absolutely crushed this fly. So they will eat anything. So you don't have to throw big flies. You should just throw the fly that you're most comfortable with, that you feel confident in fishing, and that I think in general is fun to throw. Because if you're going to throw something for 2 or 3 hours and it's not fun, you're not going to have fun. But that being said, of course, we all have our favorite flies. So I'll just go over some real basic ones. This 3M Wildwood Minnow, it's about a 3.5, 4-inch fly. It's made of material that is super light, quick shedding, so it doesn't hold a lot of water. Has a lot of great flash. I think it's easy to fish. It's probably my go-to pike fly. Next screen. Game changers are super popular. And the reason is they work. They're articulated. They have great movement. I don't fish big game changers. I'm typically fishing about a 3-inch game changer. That's what works best for me. But they certainly make bigger ones and smaller ones depending on your personal preference. Some of these more classic flies that are a little bit bigger in that sort of maybe 6-inch to 10-inch range, made of bucktail, have what we call a Buford head, pushes a lot of water, can get good attention from the pike, and they also flat out work. And then occasionally I like to fish for them on the top. This is a howitzer bait fish popper. I think it's supposed to mimic a wounded, dying bait fish that's kind of floating to the top. I have a green one, so it probably looks like a frog. And getting a pike to go top water, always exciting. So intermediate lines, this is actually the line that I use the most. That's a personal preference. I like a slow sinking line that gets a little bit underneath the surface, but doesn't sink too fast. I feel like I can control that a little better. I can fish a weighted fly or an unweighted fly with an intermediate sink line. So this is the line I'm typically using from late spring to summer. And I'm typically targeting pike either in the early morning or sunset, where the it's just not quite as hot. It's a little bit cooler. I think pike like that a little bit more. When it gets super, super hot, it can be a little bit difficult for them. They're not as aggressive, or they're a little bit more lethargic. So I think, sunset, sunrise fishing, best time for pike. I will do a full sink or sink tip line, typically as we move into fall, or if I am going to be fishing during the midday. In my experience, pike tend to go a little bit deeper at these times, so you want to be able to get down a little bit faster. And a floating line is totally a great line to use. I think it's probably the most versatile line. I think if you're going to use this floating line, especially if you're going to be throwing bigger flies, you'll want something with a short, compact head that weight forward, that just is able to deliver a lot of energy to turn over these slightly heavier flies. So something like this Orvis bank shot line or a Rio outbound short. Every fly company has sort of this short, compact headline that works really well. And then if you want to be able to get it down a little bit deeper, you could attach a poly leader and pair it with that floating line, and it helps the fly sink a little bit. So if you want to fish a non-weighted fly, this is a good option with a float line. So leaders, just like flies, there's so many ways that you can tie a leader. Everyone has a personal preference. I usually keep things super simple. I don't generally fish super long leaders when I'm fishing for pike. They are not leader shy. They are not tippet shy, and for the most part. So I will fish about a 5 to 7 foot leader. any longer, I think you're just risking chances of tangling and just having a difficult turnover of your fly. So for me, I use 40-pound nylon or fluorocarbon, about 2.5 feet of that. I blood knot it to 2.5 feet of 25 or 30-pound nylon or fluorocarbon. And then I will tie that to the wire tippet. And I typically use a knottable one. Heather, can you go to full screen real quick? So knottable wire is, it's great because it's flexible. So you can see I can actually turn this around my finger. It doesn't have a ton of memory. You can tie clinch knots, non-slip mono-loop knots. You can tie blood knots or Albright knots with this. So this is a good, I think a good option to use. I don't know if people can see that, sorry. It's pretty hard to see, but there's every brand makes one, Rio, Scientific Anglers. This one's called American Fishing Wire. If you don't want to use wire, like I said, you can use a thicker fluorocarbon. So something in that, I would recommend something in the 60 to 80-pound range personally. And so, as we mentioned before, bite tippet is absolutely necessary because pike are toothy critters. Their teeth are incredibly sharp and they will easily bite through 40 pounds of monofilament. If you're not interested in doing a lot of knots with either big, thick fluorocarbon or this wire guard, a great option, or you change flies a lot, another great option is something called a stay lock snap. And basically you just clinch knot it to the end of your fluorocarbon bite guard or your wire guard. And you just simply unclip it and you can slide the eye of a fly through that. Another one is this quick clip. Gnome offers them on her website. I've used these actually, and I like them actually more than the stay lock because they're a lot easier to get your flies on and off. Stay locks can kind of sometimes be very stiff. And they actually hurt my finger to try to get them undone and redone. So these quick clips are a good option too. Simple, same leader, you just add on that quick clip and then attach the fly. So that's just a nice picture of that. So I'm just going to touch on casting a little bit. So in general, your casting with bigger flies is going to be different than the traditional type loop that we would use for like dry fly trout fishing. So in that tight loop, you have a little bit more of a vertical plane or casting stroke. With an oval or Belgium cast, you're typically kind of forming, it's called a constant tension cast. It's a little bit more of an open loop. And the reason why you want to do this cast is that these flies are heavier, your line and leader system is heavier, and it can often collapse when you're trying to cast these in a super tight loop. And you can have your flies collide with your rod tip very often. So we don't want any broken rod tips. And basically, you come, instead of going straight up and down, you come more on a horizontal plane, and then you kind of convert into a vertical plane to deliver. It's not essential, but learning to double haul can also improve your distance. So you've gotten everything, you've picked your fly, you've thrown it out in the water. And as with all streamer fishing, try a variety of retrieves. Every day will be different, whether it's slow, fast, erratic, super long pauses, short little pauses, super long strips. Anything can work. If you're not catching after 20 minutes, switch something up. And then as always, if you feel something on the end of your line, strip set. Try not to trout set. So you've hooked this beautiful pike, and now you've got to get this fly out of its toothy mouth. How are you going to do that? That can actually be the most difficult part of fly fishing for pike or any toothy critters. Pike are extremely slippery. I don't know if anyone's ever caught or smelled a pike. They don't smell super awesome, unfortunately. They are very slimy. They are slippery. They like to jump out of your hands. And then they have really sharp teeth, so you can't put your hand in their mouth to try to remove your fly. You'll probably definitely get bitten. So don't ever put your hand or finger in a pike's mouth. Don't ever lip a pike for that same reason. And the reason why a net can be so helpful is that you can keep your fish in that water while you prepare to unhook this pike. There is one method, it's called a gill plate grab. I'm gonna have you, I don't have a pike, I have a Mr. Sharkey, so he will represent our or toothy critter here. So sharp teeth, don't ever do this. Bad, loose fingers. Each pike, they have what's called a gill plate. So it's just basically this little flap, and it's usually on the undersurface. And this flap is actually, you can actually move it back and forth. And right underneath, when you just basically lift it gently, you'll see the gills. So a gill plate grab is meant to grab this flap of tissue, the plate here. And basically you make your hand like a hook like this. You gently slide up like this, and then you're gonna pinch. And you're actually pinching right here. So not like this, but kind of like this. So you wanna pinch like that. And this will actually control the head of the pike. So then once you're controlling the head, you basically control the fish. What you don't want to do is put your hands in the gill. So don't do this and then stick your hands here. First, you'll probably kill the fish. Two, these gills have rakers and they're sharp, and so they can cut your knuckles. So don't put your head in the red stuff, just the white stuff. Like I said, once you control the head, you can use a pair of forceps and remove the pike. And actually, sometimes when you gill plate them, they'll actually open their mouths automatically. So as we mentioned, don't put your finger in the gills. That's the biggest key there. If you're not comfortable with a gill plate grab, that's okay. What you will want then is a pair of jaw spreaders. I've got one, something like this, long pliers. So basically you can just gently, we'll go back to Mr. Sharkey here, Mr. Sharkey. So you can sometimes, depending if you're right or left-handed and your comfort level, I'm right-handed, so I like to hold my instruments in my right hand. You can just gently grab the pike just behind the head, kind of in the neck region, just behind the gills. What you don't want to do is, I've been told this is the Montana handshake, where you grab the pike and you just like squeeze it to death. That we don't want to do that. Just a gentle grab is fine. And then you can get your jaw spreaders in, open the mouth, then you get your clips and get the fly out like that. Don't squeeze them too hard. Don't throw them on the ground and step on their head. I've seen people do that. That's horrible. That's not respecting our fish here. And then lastly, if you can't remove the hook safely, either for your safety or the fish's safety because it's too deep, or it's just actually in the gill, the best thing to do is get your heavy wire cutter, cut that hook as close as possible, and then just release the fish. Photography. So this is, I think, is becoming more important as we're realizing that time out of water for any fish species can be detrimental to their health, not just trout. So same with pike, we want to limit their time out of water. When we're taking a picture, we want to support the pike by both its head and its body. Especially if it's a large pike, I try not to hold it completely vertical because it could potentially crush and disrupt their internal organs. Or if you're going to, just be very quick about it. And then you can either gill plate grab them or support the pike just underneath their head, your fingers between the pectoral fins to help control the head, and then support the lower half and get your picture and then back into the water. And when you're releasing a pike, you may need to revive the fish. Since they are hard fighters, it's like they just ran a sprint for a mile, they're exhausted, and that may take 30 seconds or it may take 5 minutes, and you should really just make sure you don't release the fish until the fish is ready to be released. So you hold on to the tail for support, and then you don't need to move the pike back and forth in the water. That's not necessary. You can just hold them still. And basically, I'll occasionally turn them over to their side. If they don't right themselves, they're not recovered. And so when they're able to do that and they start to move their tail, I think at that point it's okay to let them go. Thank you so much.